I'm sure you and Jericho will form an instant bond.
Ever since the release of its first season on Apple TV Plus back in November of 2019, Servant has been making headlines as the newest franchise from the twisted mind of M. Night Shyamalan. And with its creepy mixture of real-world problems meets supernatural, it's really no surprise that its third installment is so highly anticipated. But what do we really know about the behind-the-scenes workings of the show, and how has the popular director ensured that Servant remains as ambiguous as possible? Well, whether you're a fanatic of the franchise or just want to know more about the various ways in which production needs are met, stay right where you are, as we're about to explore the behind-the-scenes secrets that have been revealed about Season 3. So strap yourselves in and get ready for an informative ride as things are about to get exciting. But before we get into it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe with notifications on so you don't miss out on any new videos we post. Number 1. The location choice for Season 3. For those of you who are a bit late to the party, Servant surrounds the life and times of the Turner family. We joined back in Season 1 in the midst of a terrible tragedy. You see, the Turners were the unfortunate recipients of one of God's cruel tricks, with their baby Jericho fortunately passing away after living for just 13 weeks. With his wife Dorothy Turner in absolute tatters because of the incredible pain that followed the event, Sean decides to get her a realistic-looking doll who replaces the now-gone Jericho. And while this was the only way to get her out of her slump, Sean now finds that Dorothy has taken things a bit too far, employing a strange nanny by the name Leanne Grayson to come and look after Jericho while the Turners are busy. And it's precisely at this point that things kick off for the first time with Leanne, who's portrayed expertly by Nell Tiger Free, taking on the employment position without much of a fuss. But as the series continues, the audience is faced with some pretty terrifying realizations. Dorothy, for example, is for some or other reason connected to the death of Jericho, who was previously explained as simply not waking up one day. And Leanne is revealed to have been a child of a cult known solely as the Church of Lesser Saints. From this short description, you can already see the overall vibe of the show developing, which teeters on the wall separating realism and the supernatural. And in clear M. Night Shyamalan fashion, whether the series dabbles in one realm or the other is completely up to the interpretation given by the audience to the franchise. This is, after all, what has made the series one of the most talked about Apple TV Plus shows that's currently on the market. And you might be surprised to hear that the location of the set actually has a lot to do with this. M. Night Shyamalan grew up in Montgomery County, which finds itself within the bounds of Greater Philadelphia. So when it came to questions regarding where the project was going to be filmed, he wouldn't take no for an answer. According to Shyamalan, keeping the context of the show isolated and close to his heart did two things overall. First, it resulted in the audience familiarizing itself with the world in which Servant is set. Rather than causing rapid change with new environments, he wanted the view to feel almost trapped where everything was happening. Secondly, by keeping it in an environment so dear to him, he was able to translate his true emotion to his directing, resulting in a raw product with an air of realism. When talking to the Reddit community in an Ask Me Anything thread, he said the following: "For Servant, placing it right in the center of the city on Spruce Street was a big deal. It makes it feel real and close to my heart, yet all the ideas of what it's like to walk through the city or what it's like to live on that street are from people that I know. There's an authenticity to it." And considering just how important the context of the environment ends up being for theorists out there, we understand why it's such a big deal for Shyamalan to get this realistic environment right. For those of you who have already watched the Season 1 finale of the show, you'll know that the concept of missing children is pretty important. The same can be said about the direction that Season 2 ended up going in. So take a closer look at how the town has been set up and you'll discover that some behind-the-scenes strokes of genius have been included to give us a heads up of where the story was actually going. As it turns out, M. Night Shyamalan decided to plaster missing children posters all over the city as a foreshadowing of what was about to come. And we would argue that a change of location would undermine this drastically. Number 2, the slamming door trope. At its very core, Servant is a horror franchise that keeps the audience guessing whether the supernatural things being experienced are real or merely within the head of an untrustworthy narrator. And as such, the series has come to rely on a few jump scare moments that will feel familiar to a fan of the horror genre. A trope that is often used across the industry is the slamming of doors, which not only elicits a response due to the loud sound that it makes, but causes the viewer to question whether something nefarious is going on behind the scenes. Was it just the wind, or is there something supernatural going on with that creepy-looking Jericho doll? What nobody really asked, though, is how the production staff actually get doors to act this way. And as it turns out, there are quite a few behind-the-scenes secrets that have revealed how the crew of Servant were able to do this. It won't surprise you to hear that most of the time this is nothing more than great camera work. Look at the majority of these types of situations and you'll see that the bottom of the door is unfortunately out of frame. This allows a member of the cast to simply reach out from out of frame and slam the door with some force, scaring both the characters and viewers of the scene. This is not the case when it comes to the slamming of a door that's completely in frame though. In this instance, we see the production crew attaching a piece of fishing line to the door, which is next to invisible to the cameras shooting the scene. So when the time comes for the door to slam shut, this is nothing more than a cast member pulling on the string. And if the string ever shows up in post-production, the editors and virtual effects artists use their magic to paint the string out using refraction techniques and virtual coloring in. More often than not though, these scenes are kept as practical as possible. Number 3. Only revealing certain script details. M. Night Shyamalan has also revealed that he doesn't like to give the entire script to cast members on the show. This way, certain characters are kept in the dark about what's going on around them, allowing the cast to actually react with real surprise and horror when coming to terms with what's actually happening. There's a fine line between keeping your cast ignorant and blissfully unaware though, with the incredible director doing his best to fall into the latter category. A great example of this can once more be seen in the door shutting scene in the second season, where Toby Kebbell, who portrays Sean Turner on the show, has to react. According to Toby, he was never actually told that the door was going to slam, with Shyamalan keeping this from him and allowing him to instead react with raw emotion. This doesn't work without first talking to your cast about how things like this might be taking place throughout filming. That's precisely what Shyamalan did. According to Toby, the director informed them that if anything strange just happens to be going on while filming, the cast should just go with it, preparing them for scenes such as this. Number 4. The stormy night. Quite a few filming techniques were also used throughout the franchise to paint Leanne in a negative light, leading to the popular conclusion that it was her supernatural powers that actually resulted in the reincarnation of baby Jericho. And while we're still not sure whether this was what actually happened, there's no doubt that M. Night Shyamalan intended it with a number of shots. Think of the scenario in the second season where Leanne is pictured sitting on her bed in the darkness with lightning striking outside and leaving everything flooded with light except for her face. Go behind the scenes and you'll discover that this effect was simply reached by placing a large spotlight outside of the window and switching it on and off quite quickly. The sound of lightning was then added in post-production along with the further darkening of the scene. Suffice to say, this was enough to lead many to believe that she had everything to do with the occult that appears to be following her around. Simple, yet effective. Number 5. That fake blood. Must also be said that M. Night Shyamalan has a tendency to add fake blood into his franchises wherever the need arises. Goes without saying that Servant was no exception to the rule. Rather than using real blood, the production crew went on to create fake blood, which was nothing more than a combination of syrup, red dye, and cornstarch to make it appear as thick as the bodily liquid usually is. So, whenever you see a scene with a character splattered with blood, just know that it actually tasted pretty decent. Number 6. The real Jericho. And last but not least, Shyamalan commented recently that the show couldn't have been made without the use of a realistic Jericho doll, which he, of course, got a hold of. Not everything about Jericho is 100% real though. You'll notice that there are certain scenes where the baby doll appears to move. As it turns out, this was the result of some virtual tweaking and speeding up of the tape as performed in post-production. By using these techniques, the viewer was kept on the wall, not knowing whether what was happening was real or supernatural by nature. But what do you think of these behind-the-scenes secrets that will most likely be used once more in the third season of the franchise? Be sure to let us know in the comments section down below.